Daniel was called a thief before he even finished the appraisal. It happened in the hallway of the Denver probate court with a burnt coffee smell drifting out of a nearby machine and the nephew pointing a shaky finger at him. People turned their heads. Someone muttered something under their breath. Daniel felt the sting of humiliation hit harder than the caffeine he had not finished. 2 days earlier the case had looked routine. A deceased computer science professor. A small Park Hill bungalow. Some modest investments. No spouse or children. Distant relatives fighting the cold by rubbing their hands and checking their phones while pretending to care. The firm sent Daniel to catalog the contents of the house and estimate value. He stepped inside and found the usual mix. Old carpets. Stacks of journals. A green sofa with cat hair still clinging to the fabric. A stubborn smell of dust and radiator heat. What stood out was the professor's study. Everything there looked arranged with deliberate care. Metal filing cabinets. Neatly sorted binders. And a heavy oak desk that faced the window like a ship captain chair. Early on he found a small gain. An Omega watch tucked in a drawer. Worth a few hundred. He logged it quickly. Then the first setback hit. The power flickered and died in half the rooms. The nephew refused to go to the basement to flip the breaker. Daniel did the walkthrough with a headlamp and a backup battery for his phone. Sweating under his jacket. By the time he sat at the oak desk his legs were tired and his patience thinner than the dust layer on the shelves. He opened drawers and found nothing unusual. Pens. Rubber bands. Bank statements. The professor's laptop was cheap and outdated. It made no sense that a tech-minded man had almost no hardware. When Daniel closed the last drawer his knee hit the underside of the desk. Something inside gave a dull thud. Not wood. Not paper. He reached under and felt a loose board. It shifted when he pressed it. That was when footsteps sounded on the porch and more family voices entered the hallway, while Daniel kept his fingers on a hidden edge that felt like a door waiting to open. Privacy vanished the moment the relatives filled the house again. The aunt wandered the study, touching objects as if claiming them. The cousin asked Daniel if any of the stuff was worth posting online. The nephew hovered like a watchdog waiting for a mistake. Daniel kept his composure and waited for a chance to return to the desk alone. He finally shut the study door and counted to 3. The room held steady silence. He knelt and slipped the letter opener under the loose strip of wood. A sharp twist. The panel gave way and a shallow drawer slid out with rough friction. His knuckles scraped a screw and stung. Inside lay 2 black external hard drives with labels BTC1 and BTC2 written in careful pen strokes. A small flash drive rested beside them with a faded label reading wallet backup. An envelope sat tucked at the side. He pulled the envelope out. On the front it said, "For whoever handles my estate." His stomach tightened. Someone dropped a glass in the kitchen. Voices rose. Daniel pushed the drawer back in and hid the panel. He wiped his hand on his jeans and headed toward the kitchen before anyone got curious. The weight of what he had found stayed firmly in his chest. The next day the lawyer arrived to inspect everything. Together they opened the panel again. Under the sharper afternoon light, the drives looked even more serious. The lawyer read the letter inside the envelope. Her face showed a shift when she reached the part about cold storage instructions and offline passphrase. At the end of the page, the professor warned never to plug anything into a connected computer. They carried the drives to the dining table. Daniel fetched his old air-gapped laptop. The lawyer booted a clean system from a thumb drive. Every step felt like walking on a floor that might crack. When the first drive connected, the laptop showed a folder with wallet files. The professor had organized everything with calm precision. A text file listed balances from years earlier. With current prices, the numbers meant the professor had left behind enough value to change the entire estate. A passphrase prompt stopped them cold. The letter described only part of the phrase. At the margin of the page, the professor mentioned a second envelope stored in a safe deposit box downtown. In the quiet room, both of them knew this would not stay simple. Days grew heavier fast. The judge learned about the digital assets. The relatives began circling the situation like hungry birds. The nephew accused Daniel directly in the courthouse corridor, saying, "You were alone in that room. How much did you hide?" The lawyer intervened before the argument escalated. The credit union refused access to the safe deposit box without proper documents. Meanwhile, the drive stayed locked in the lawyer office inside a fireproof container. Daniel went back to finish the rest of his appraisal. Every chair and teacup felt trivial beside a hidden fortune that existed only in encrypted files. Then the basement complication arrived. He finally descended the weak stairs with his headlamp. At the far corner behind a fallen filing cabinet sat a small metal safe embedded partly in the wall. Dust coated every inch. The combination dial was stiff but intact. Nobody had mentioned this safe. Daniel snapped a photo and left it untouched. Another unknown variable had joined the list. When he told the lawyer, she sighed through the phone. She had already spent the morning explaining to the court why digital assets required extra caution. Now there was a physical safe too. That afternoon the credit union said the professor's old signature on his safe deposit paperwork did not match the current records. They would require every heir present. Another delay. Another spark for family conflict. Daniel stood alone on the walkway in front of the small house as the sun dipped behind the block. The place looked ordinary, but the air around it felt loaded with tension. Each locked container seemed to echo the professor's distrust of systems and trust only in mathematics. The safe deposit box meeting brought everyone together in brittle silence. The credit union manager rolled out the metal box on a small cart. Inside the private room, the tray held one envelope and one spiral notebook. The envelope bore the professor's handwriting. Final instructions for digital assets. They opened it. Inside was a clear outline of wallet structures and 2 complete passphrases. The spiral notebook contained redundant instructions and a set of backup keys. The professor had been methodical to the last detail. The number of coins listed was high enough that the room temperature seemed to shift. The aunt sat down heavily. The cousin whispered a curse. The nephew stared at the sheet with something between greed and shock. Without guidance, they risked losing everything. The lawyer advised bringing in a cryptocurrency estate specialist. No one liked the idea of another outsider, but they agreed. 2 days later, Carla, the specialist, set up a clean machine in a small co-working room. She disabled radios, unplugged the router, and taped over every camera. She connected the BTC drives one at a time and verified the files. Then came the long, quiet moment. She entered the first passphrase. The wallet opened. The coins were real. The holdings matched the professor notes. The relatives looked stunned. The nephew asked what Daniel cut would be. The tension in the room thickened. The lawyer explained that the court could award a finder's fee because Daniel had discovered and documented assets that could have been forgotten forever. The nephew clenched his jaw but said nothing more. They moved the coins to new cold wallets under court supervision. Everything was logged and witnessed. No one wanted a single shadow in the process. Daniel left the co-working building late in the afternoon feeling drained. He had expected to appraise furniture and rugs. Instead, he had walked through a maze built by a cautious professor who trusted nobody fully. Months passed. The estate wound through legal channels. The drive stayed under strict custody. The relatives filed the occasional complaint but eventually accepted the division. The judge approved a distribution plan and a modest finder's fee for Daniel. He used the money to pay down loans and trade his sputtering sedan for a reliable used hybrid. People reacted in different ways. A friend said he should have kept one of the drives for himself. His brother joked that nobody would have noticed a missing passphrase. The lawyer sent him a handwritten thank you card for handling everything with integrity. During that time, Daniel kept thinking about the professor's safe in the basement. When it was finally opened weeks later, it held only old tax returns and floppy disks containing obsolete research. Nothing valuable. Just another layer of a cautious mind. The house sold to a young couple who renovated it and sent cheerful photos to the estate lawyer. The study became a nursery. The oak desk went to the nephew, who sent Daniel a picture after placing a gaming monitor on it. The hidden drawer remained empty. Unexpectedly, Daniel bought a small hardware wallet of his own and placed a modest amount of Bitcoin on it. Not because he hoped for riches, but because he now understood the quiet discipline behind cold storage. It felt like learning a skill the professor had spent decades refining. He continued his appraisal work. Storage units. condos, old barns. Usually nothing special. But he now walked into each place with a sharper eye for hidden compartments and stray sounds under furniture. Sometimes he remembered the moment his knee hit the underside of the professor's desk and the thud answered him. A simple noise that changed everything. The following autumn he drove past the Park Hill bungalow again. The lawn was clean. Kids' chalk drawings colored the driveway. Nothing hinted at the drama that once unfolded inside. Daniel understood something then. The value of what he found mattered less than how he handled it. The real test happened in that quiet study when he could have slipped the drives into his bag and walked out without a trace. Instead, he chose transparency. He did not see himself as heroic. Just someone who made the right decision on a day when it counted. That choice paid off in unexpected ways. Financially, yes, but also in the confidence he now carried. The work felt different. More grounded. More honest. On evenings when he updated his modest cold wallet, he would think about the professor. A private man who trusted no one fully but built careful systems that outlived him. Daniel respected that. The story ended without drama. No conspiracies. No miracles. Just a hidden drawer discovered by someone who believed in doing his job well even when no one was watching. And that was enough to turn an ordinary appraisal into a turning point that shaped the quiet path ahead.